Hello and welcome to Hear the Cannons, presented by BucsGameday. I am your host, Colin Hallboom, and I am joined by the same two gentlemen I am every week, Caleb Skinner, fellow writer at BucsGameday, and our writer and editor, River Wells. Now, before we get going, just want to remind everyone to head over to BucsGameday.com, which is Sports Illustrated's only website that's dedicated specifically to covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Please make sure that you are subscribed to this YouTube channel. And if you're not watching on YouTube, head over there. It helps us out. We want to pull those comments up, top priority if you got them during the show. And we do encourage you to drop any hot takes, cold takes, questions, or whatever you may have so we can discuss it live on the air. So we are going to talk about more work to be done. The Buccaneers have a huge game this week versus the LA Chargers, who recently did the Buccaneers a huge favor by knocking off the Atlanta Falcons. And what we're going to do is we're going to break down this matchup. Of course, that's the main topic of this episode, but it's going to be a tall task because the Chargers are a good team. They're currently 8-5. They are led by a dynamic quarterback, Justin Herbert. They got a new coach in Mr. Harbaugh, who's got it better than him, and they're looking really good. The new mentality to go with his presence. So, but first off, gentlemen, as it stands today, the Bucs are first in the NFC South. And the question of the week I want to pose to each of you, and I'm going to start with Caleb, is the loss of Antoine Winfield too much to overcome for this defense? We know this team needs to go on a run to close out the season. That's imperative. The Falcons have a pretty easy schedule as well the rest of the way. Can the Bucs get the job done even if Antoine Winfield Jr. is out for the remainder of the regular season? And there is a chance that could happen.
I don't think it's going to ultimately kill the Buccaneers. We have seen them dealt with injuries all season long, and they have kind of faced that adversity, head on. They've seen positives from that, and they've seen negatives from it. And there are holes that are going to be in the defense and things that are going to happen that usually Antoine Winfield is able to make up for, especially with his turnover prowess that he is known for being able to do on the football field. But if we look at the type of year that Antoine's had up to this point, he hasn't really been that same all-pro player that we have seen, especially last year and in the years before that. So it's really, really interesting to see what's going to happen. Hopefully, Mike Edwards comes back sooner rather than later from his injury to kind of help out with that. But you did have Todd Bowles and company bring in some guys that are familiar with this defense. We saw some great play last week from Kayvon Merriweather, maybe not great, but he was able to make an impact, especially on plays that were needed to be made. And he was, hitting hard and making tackles. And then you obviously brought in Keanu Neal, which, as Bucs fans know, and they aren't the biggest fan of his, but he does know Todd Bowles' defense very, very well. And you could even think about, sliding Christian Izzy in back there, especially with Tyke Smith being back. So I don't think it's boom or bust really for the Buccaneers not having Antoine Winfield. It's going to hurt because you are losing that all-pro caliber player. But the Buccaneers have faced this before, and they've been able to come away with wins, but they've also suffered losses. So it'll have to be, kind of a communal effort across the whole defense for them to be able to come through and continue a little bit of strong play as the season winds down.
How about you, River? I mean, obviously the secondary has experienced an unprecedented amount of injuries. Do you think now, without their best defensive back, they can overcome that and still capture the NFC South?
Yeah, this isn't, exactly confirmed, but just, a thought process. Winfield's had a down year this year a little bit, and he did injure his foot in week 1 of the regular season against the Washington Commanders. And I would wager that it might have something to do with that. I think he's, he hasn't been 100%, I don't think. And he hasn't played up to the all-pro standard he played last year. Not to say that him being out is good, because it's definitely not, and you would much rather have him in as a veteran who knows the defense. But you're going to have guys like, Caleb said, you got guys like Ryan Neal in there. If Mike Edwards can come back, which Todd Bowles said he was progressing nicely today, I don't know if that confirms he's playing this Sunday, but it means that he's probably not going to be out for an extended period of time. Having him back will probably help a little bit. And then if you get to the playoffs, hopefully Jordan Whitehead might be able to make an appearance off of IR with that pectoral. So, and then maybe Antoine as well, if they get there. So we don't really know exactly how severe his knee sprain is, but I think that the Bucs can do enough damage in this remaining slate of games without him to be able to clutch this up, as the young kids say. You've got the Chargers this Sunday, and then Cowboys, Panthers, Saints. That's not a super difficult schedule to face. The Bucs defense isn't amazing, as many people would understand, but I think they can do enough to get into the playoffs. And if they get into the playoffs, I think there's a good chance they might have some of those guys back, including maybe Antoine, maybe Jordan Whitehead. And that would be beneficial. So definitely want to monitor where Antoine's at, and we'll check in later in the season, obviously. But for right now, he's not there, and it's that next man up mentality.
Yeah, something they're used to. And although the defensive metrics are a little more favorable for the Buccaneers coming off that bye week, they've also had a very light schedule. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. It will be a different animal when they take on the Chargers at SoFi this Sunday. And let's talk a little bit about what we know about this LA Chargers team. And River, I'm gonna keep with you here. Why don't you tell us about this offense? Because Harbaugh has brought a new identity for the offense in particular, and despite, Justin Herbert's balling out, but he's great. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch play. The guy can make every throw. So tell us about this offense and what the Bucs defense is going to be up against in this game.
Well, it's a Greg Roman offense, and if it's a Roman offense, it's a running offense. And so they definitely have that sort of mentality there with guys like Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins. If you look at the metrics, actually, they're fairly average to below average. 24th in yards per game in the NFL, 23rd in TDs per game, 20th in points per game. So they're not really putting up a lot of points, but we talked to a lot of different people. We talked to Vita Vea, we talked to Todd Bowles, we talked to Baker Mayfield, and they all three said a very similar phrase, and that this team does not beat itself. If you look at the penalty stats, they are the third best penalty team in the National Football League with 42.8 penalty yards per game. And Justin Herbert has only thrown one pick all year. He does not turn the ball over. He's really good at going through his progressions and making throws. And the Bucs have beaten themselves quite a bit this season. And if the Chargers play against you, they're 8-5, partially because they just don't make a lot of mistakes under that Jim Harbaugh team, who does have it better than them in that aspect. So really, you're going to have to be on your A game, and this offense might not dazzle you with points. Herbert's only thrown 14 touchdowns this year, but they don't mess up. They take care of the football. They take care of business. And if you can beat yourself, they will sit there and watch it happen right in front of you. So that's going to be the key, is to be, as the players say, on your P's and Q's. And this offense might not dazzle you, but it sure is a smooth operation, and there's not a lot of wrenches in that machine. So defense is going to have to be on point, and that makes them a hard offense to play just by virtue of how disciplined they are. So that's a unique challenge for the Bucs defense. When you have coverage busts and all that, and players filling in that next pin-up mentality, you can't have communication errors. You can't have those lapses against a team like this Chargers team, because they're not going to have any. So it's a unique challenge for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And we got a question about Richard asks, how is LA's O-line? Well, I'll tell you, they got two bookend tackles. One they drafted with their first selection in the draft, which was Joe Alt. He was
Joe's
the premier
been
tackle
fantastic this year. Yeah,
he has. And then they also have, formerly of Northwestern, Rashawn Slater, another premium draft pick who has panned out quickly. So he fits right into that mold of what Jim Harbaugh wants, because he wants to pound the rock. And then Zion Johnson out of Boston College a couple of years ago, he's a guard. His career hasn't gotten off to, maybe, like, again, first round pick, hasn't gotten off to like an elite level, but he's certainly a solid starter by, as far as I know. Like, I haven't been breaking these guys down, but this is just what I know to answer this question from Richard. And then Bradley Bozeman's a guy who's an experienced center who's got, I believe he came over from the Ravens, if I'm not mistaken. And he's a solid player, a reliable veteran. And then they recently drafted Jamari Salyer out of Georgia. So that's another guy they have in the wings playing at the right guard spot, but they have him listed on the depth chart behind Trey Pipkins. So they're okay. They're getting there, but the two bookend tackles, similar to Tampa Bay, right? You got some unproven guys on the interiors aside from the center, and you got two really strong tackles. Let's shift to the defensive side of the ball and throw it to our guy, Caleb Skinner. Caleb, tell us about this Chargers defense, man.
Yeah, it's probably, we've talked all season about the defenses the Bucs had to face, whether it's the Chiefs, whether it's the Niners, but this is perhaps the best defense that the Buccaneers are going to face this season, and it's spearheaded by just Jesse Minter. Obviously, we know their former head coach kind of ran their defense up until this season with Harbaugh coming in and Minter taking over. He's made it a bit more simplistic, kind of getting it more of a unity type feel, playing as a team, playing as one unit instead of just playing as individuals and trying to make splash plays here and there. But let me go ahead and read off some things to you guys. They're going to have Asante Samuel Jr., a cornerback for them, is likely to be back here in week 15. And then there's questionable guys like safety Tony Jefferson could be back, as well as middle linebacker Denzel Perriman. They like to play a lot of two high safety, obviously with Derwin James being the head of the snake back there. And he's having a tremendous season with Minter being able to put him and play him all over the field. But when you look at the coverage aspect of things, they play a lot of man-to-man on one side of the ball. And then on the other side of the ball, they're going to play a combination, or on the other side of the field, they're going to play a combination of sorts when it comes to their defense in multiple different aspects there. But just going off of that, they're 11th overall in defense, allowing 323 yards per game. They've only allowed 21 touchdowns all season, 8th in passing defense with 206.1 yards per game, 14th in rushing defense with 117.6 yards per game. They're the number one scoring defense in the league at 15.9 points allowed per game. And they're also first in red zone defense, where they are only allowing offenses to score 41.9% of the time, so well below even 50% there. And then you also have them at 7th on third down defense, only allowing teams to convert at a 35% clip as well. And then if you want to go into more of an analytical feel outside of just the stats that are at a ranking there, you can look at their PFF grade. They are ranked 4th overall on the defense at 79.1, which is fantastic. 6th against the rush, which is at 73.8. And then 2nd in coverage at 88.6. So they really excel against the pass here while being semi-strong against the run. PFF gives them a little bit higher grade than what their statistical ranking is in the league. But they have a lot of guys there. I've already spoken about their coverage guy, and then obviously their utility man in Derwin James. But you look at where everything starts, and it all starts along the trenches, right, on the defensive line. And they've got a couple of edge rushers, or more than a couple of edge rushers that you got to worry about, whether it's, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, you got Tuli Tuipulotu, and Bud Dupree as well. So those guys, I know River's shaking his head. I did pretty well on that. That was pretty,
I'll give you props on that one.
Yeah, but I made it through.
I'll give you a B+.
Thank you guys. But that's what you're going to really worry about, and you're going to have to rely on your tackles to be able to stop these edge rushers, maybe get, Payne and Cade involved in some chips. And then the running backs are going to have to stand up too, when they're bringing blitzes and whatnot. So, Rashad has done a great job of that. Bucky's done a great job of that. Sean, not so much, still, in the learning curve of that. But it's something, this defense is legit, right? Like, this defense is one of the best defenses in the league, and it will cause the Buccaneers problems, especially considering the Buccaneers offense is more so in common with what you see around the league, unlike the Chargers offense, which is not very common around the league these days. So it'll be a challenge. It'll be up to Liam Cohen and company to kind of play chess, not checkers, against Minter, because he is having a great season as a first-year defensive coordinator there in LA.
Love it. That's good stuff, Caleb. Thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, when this defense played Kirk Cousins, they forced him to turn the ball over. I mean, you could criticize Cousins all you want, but they made some plays. I mean, still, Tarheeb Still, I think his name is, had multiple sacks in that game, which was impressive. So, River, I want to talk about play the advantage disadvantage angle here. Tell us, what is the Buccaneers' biggest disadvantage in this game? We know their team strength is offense, weakness is defense. Is that what this is going to be, and can you give us a little detail as to why you chose what you chose for that?
I think it will be defense, and it's on top of you have little moments of discipline that kind of fall by the wayside, especially in coverage and uncoverage. And we've talked about this too. The Bucs have these meltdown moments all the time, and it happens sometimes when they're up and they just let teams get back in it and they fail to execute. People talk about the second quarter, and that's definitely a big part of it, but it really happens. It's happened at some point in a lot of these games. So I'm going to go with that. You can call it defense because that's where it ends up hurting them the most, but I think overall discipline, and not just with penalties, like you mentioned, because believe it or not, the Buccaneers are actually the fourth best penalty team in the NFL at 44.5 yards per game, right below the Chargers in that respect. So they actually do decent there, but they're going to have to be very, very close to flawless when they play and execute, and they haven't been recently. And the Chargers are very good at that, and they will just sit and watch you beat yourself. Players have mentioned it all day today. So I think that's going to be what I say is the biggest disadvantage. They have to play one of the better disciplined games they played all year, I think, to win this game. So you're going out west, travel time, playing on the road in SoFi, you're going to need to do that.
Do you think there's any worth in mentioning here as well, River, with the way that Baker Mayfield has kind of got the yips as of late?
Yes, absolutely. I think so. And we saw it yesterday. We saw it on Sunday against the Raiders. Interceptions, 2 interceptions, and a fumble. Baker is one of the league leaders in fumbles. So he's got to play a more relaxed game that, frankly, the Panthers game was one of the worst games I think he's had as a Buccaneer. The Raiders game, he was the worst player on offense. He said so himself, but I think that's a fair assumption as well. So Baker can make great throws and can play well. And like that touchdown to Jalen McMillan on Sunday was fantastic. He's still got that in him, but he can't have that happy feet in the pocket. He's got to remain calm. He's got to remain relaxed. And he's got to play a game like he's played this year. He's played some very good football this year. We've seen it happen. I'm bought in on Baker completely. I'm bought on the contract, bought on the culture. I think he's a good quarterback. He's got to get back to that sort of play because these last 2 games have not been good enough for him. And that's part of the discipline angle I think that I was talking about. That's part of how it goes. So get that tight, get your discipline tight, P's and Q's. That's how you beat the Chargers, because they may not be world beaters at 8-5, but they're a good, disciplined football team under Jim Harbaugh, and they will watch you beat yourself. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the Buccaneers in general have lacked discipline these last couple games against these what I would call inferior opponents. Like, the penalties have crept up in recent weeks. Like, those are things that you can't afford to do against a team like the Chargers, coached by Jim Harbaugh. Caleb, biggest advantage for the Bucs. Let's look at the positive here. What do the Buccaneers need to capitalize in this game to prevail when it's all said and done?
Yeah, it was really hard to choose an area, right? Because you look at these 2 teams, they're somewhat similar, record-wise, pretty close. It's hard to pick. Like, the Buccaneers defense has struggled, but the Chargers offense isn't necessarily the high-flying or, gunslinging offense that we have seen in the past. So you can't really be like, oh, well, that's a huge advantage either one way or the other. And then you look at the opposite side either, and the Buccaneers offense is going up, even though it's been one of the best in the league, is going up against perhaps the best defense in the league. So when it came down to it, I kind of examined the smaller portions of that, right? So what have the Buccaneers really been doing well, and where have, the Chargers kind of middled or been bad? And my expertise here is that the Buccaneers run game has been tremendous this season, a complete 180 from where we have been the past 2 or 3 seasons. We're top 5 in the league, top 10 in the league in multiple different categories in the running game, whether it's Bucky Irving, whether it's Rashad White. We saw when Bucky went out last week, Rashad took over, and it's like he didn't miss a step, even though he was getting a lot of his, carries or playing time taken away by Bucky because of how well he was playing. And then you throw in the added addition of Sean Tucker and what he's able to bring as a downhill runner. And then you go back to what I spoke about earlier, and where's the one area where, the Chargers are kind of susceptible in terms of being able to stop teams, and that has been the run game. They are in the middle of the pack, sitting there at 14th, allowing 117.6 yards per game. They can get after, the quarterback fine, well, but you're going to need to be able to run the ball. You need to control the line of scrimmage, and you need to be able to control the time of possession. And that is something that the Buccaneers have done well this season. And that is because of how well the run game has been able to produce. So hopefully the Buccaneers are able to get back a maybe semi-healthy, maybe even like a 75% healthy Bucky Irving to help out Rashad and Sean Tucker. But if that's not the case, it's going to be up to Rashad White and Sean Tucker to be able to lead the way. I think, and I have the wholehearted, belief in those two and those three to be able to get it done. And that's going to have to be what has to get done, because that is your advantage. Outside of that, you could point towards being able to get pressure on Justin Herbert. But then again, we haven't seen the Buccaneers defense really be able to create pressure on the outside other than on the inside with Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey. So that's much smaller, in my opinion, as an advantage for the Buccaneers than it is for the run game to be able to exploit a middle of the pack Chargers run defense.
Love it. Thank you for that breakdown, Caleb. And then Richard on YouTube says, good to come down to special teams talking about this matchup. I mean, if so, I wouldn't have a ton of confidence just based on the Buccaneers punting situation alone, recently having turned it over to unproven Jack Browning after the Trenton Gill fiasco, following the team giving up on Jake Camarda, a guy they used a 4th-round draft pick on. So that's where my focus would be when I hear special teams as it relates to the current iteration of this team here we're talking about. Now, matchups to watch. We've already touched on some of them, but gentlemen, I want each of you to pick a specific matchup that you will be laser focused on come Sunday. Either side of the ball, could be on the sidelines, between the coaches, whatever it is. So, River, give us your matchup to watch in this game and tell us why you'll be keeping such a close eye on it.
That's a good question. I will be in the press box at SoFi on Sunday, and when I am, I think you talk about those tackles, Colin. Slayer. The Bucs pass rush has been lacking, to put it mildly. And I think getting pressure on Justin Herbert with this offensive line is going to be crucial, and you can't just rely on Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey on that matter. So I think guys like Yaya Diaby, guys like Chris Braswell, who's had a middling sort of start in rotation, guys like Anthony Nelson. If JTS is playing, then JTS. You're going to need to have those guys get after the quarterback against those really talented tackles. If you can do that, you're going to have a good day, and that's obvious, right? Because if anybody does, but the Bucs specifically have a problem with this, and if you can disrupt the edges, you can definitely disrupt the middle, and that'll allow guys like Kancey to feast. That'll allow guys like Vea to feast. So I'm going to go with the Bucs so far. Pretty bad edge rushing room against these tackles. If they can somehow click in that matchup, that's going to be a good day.
Yeah, that'd be huge for the whole D-line and Talbot's whole defense. It would help the back end, of course, with all the injuries they're dealing with and all the guys who are having to step up. Do them a favor. Get to Herbert, force him into tough situations where he's got to get rid of the ball quickly. Would love to see a big game from Yaya Diaby too. I mean, he's up there in true pressure rate. I think he's top 10 actually, according to Brandon Thorne, who tracks what he calls true pressure rate. So he's getting there and he's doing some things well. But I similar to the story of JTS, you want to see him get home a little more often. Would be a great time for him to do that in such a big game for the Buccaneers. Mr. Skinner, what you got for us, buddy? What's your matchup to watch in this one?
Yeah, there's a lot of really fun matchups to watch. It's really like strength versus weakness, which is going to be fun to watch. But really what I want to see here is the matchups for what the Tampa Bay wide receivers are going to be able to do against this multiple type of man-to-man / zone / whatever you want to call it against the number one coverage defense in the league, because Mike Evans is likely going to be getting a lot of Derwin James. That's what it's going to be. We saw, I don't know if anybody tuned in or if y'all watched the Chargers Chiefs game, but Derwin was on Kelsey all game long and giving him fits. Like, he has been tremendous this season. So you're going to expect to see, maybe a lot of double coverage on Mike. So what are these other wide receivers going to be able to do? Because if they're going to be running a little bit of zone on that side, a little bit of man on that side with Mike, they're probably going to have man-to-man on the other side of the field with whoever else is out there, whether it's Sterling Shepard, Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan, maybe throwing Cade out there a little bit, and Rashad White too. So it'll be up to these wide receivers. What are they going to be able to do? How are they going to be able to match up against these corners that have performed extremely well this season, especially with them having a couple guys out here and there as well. So that'll be a great matchup in my opinion. And with Mike, you go back to him, he wants this 1,000 yards, right? We saw it last week. He hurdled a guy for probably the first time in his entire career that I can recall. It was absolutely nuts. So you can tell that he wants this thing, right? So even if he is getting Bell covered or if he is going to have Derwin James on it, you're going to get the best of Mike, and maybe that'll, breathe a little bit of energy into the rest of the wide receiver unit. So it's going to be very, very intriguing to watch how these Buccaneers wide receivers operate against one of the best coverage units in the league.
Yeah, and you know what? I have a couple other matchups circled. Like Lad McConkey's been really balling out. He has had a tremendous rookie season. Former Georgia receiver, does it all. Really impressive route runner, good hands. We'll see if he plays in this game. He's quite banged up right now. He had a shoulder. He's got a knee issue going on. So that'll be a big thing if he's out there. And then they got a couple other guys.
He was limited, sorry to interrupt you. He was limited today in practice, which would bode well. Herbert's dealing with a ankle sprain in addition to a knee contusion. And he took press today. So that would indicate to me he's probably going to try and play. But Herbert's not doing too well at the moment. Yeah.
And that's important to mention, man. You're right, for sure. So I'm glad that you interrupted me there, River. It was well worth it. And then, but they've also got like Quentin Johnston and Joshua Palmer, good old Canadian boy. A couple guys who are capable of doing some damage in the receiving game. So really curious to see. Bucs have at least they have both their starting outside corners healthy and available in Jamel Dean and Zion McCollum, who's had a breakout season. And then, of course, really impressive rookie Tyke Smith, who had a pick last week. So how can they protect the middle of the field? Big, tall, strong arm passer. Bucs are often susceptible to quarterbacks who are capable of layering it in there or zipping it in over the middle against that soft Bulls zone defense. So really curious to see how the Bucs DBs stand up to these receivers. And then specifically Joey Bosa versus Luke Gedeke is one I'm going to keep an eye on. Gedeke's been balling out, and that's a fun one. And then you got Liam Cohen, Bucs very impressive OC versus Jesse Minter calling the defense for the Chargers. So you said it off the top, man. There's a ton of matchups I'm excited about, and I can't wait to get into that. But let's move to the degenerate side of viewership and talk about a couple prop bets I'm going to throw your guys' way and see what you would take here. It's early in the week, as always, so we don't have like all the props out, so I can't get too creative. And for all of our viewers or listeners out there, these guys have no idea what props I'm throwing at them. I don't give them a heads up. So just to make it a little more interesting. Caleb, you're up first. I'm going to give you one anytime TD scorer for the Buccaneers between Rachaad White, who's plus 110, Bucky Irving, plus 125, coming off a game where he didn't finish the game, he's injured, and then Mike Evans, plus 140. Okay, so I went from order of like least profitable to most profitable, but they're all in that plus 110 to plus 140 range from Rachaad White, Bucky Irving, and Mike Evans. Who are you taking to touch pay dirt in this game at SoFi, and why?
Yeah, so I'll go the opposite direction of you and end up with my final answer. So Mike Evans, he's going to have a lot of attention paid towards him. So it's easy to go with Mike because he is such a lethal threat, especially when he's in the red zone. But I just think it'll be a little bit tougher for him to find it here in this game. And then looking at Bucky Irving, I think the Bucs kind of want to maybe take it a little bit easy. We saw him have that hip injury 2 weeks ago that when he was walking off the field in that awesome game that he had. He came back, played last week, injured his back pretty fairly early on. So I think the Bucs might want to take it a little bit easy on Bucky, not run him as much there, but there is always the chance that he could break a big explosive play at any given moment. And that's really kind of where, he is as a running back. He's not really that guy that they put in at the goal line, which is bringing me to my final answer, and that's going to be Rachaad White. Even though his odds aren't as good as the others, he has been on a streak this year of being able to score touchdowns, and even getting it at plus odds is great in my opinion. And he has been the guy who has been getting those goal line touches. So I see Rachaad being the most likely out of those three guys to reach pay dirt in this one.
And the thing about Rashad is he's not just a threat to take a handoff or get a goal line touch, but it's as a receiver, right? He's done it so many times this year. One of the best receiving backs in the game. So he's going to be used even if Bucky is fully healthy and in the lineup. And if Bucky is not, then we could see something similar to what we did last week. So River, I'm going to give you one. I'm going to focus on the quarterback position. We talked about.
Caleb, why don't you take this? Yeah. No.
I don't care. I don't care who takes it. We need an answer. And I'm talking Baker Mayfield over under 1.5 passing touchdowns plus 100. I wanted to do the interception prop, but they didn't have that up at the books I checked. So we're talking even money over 1.5 or under 1.5 passing touchdowns for Baker Mayfield in this game.
This is a really good question. There was a point in the season where over 1.5 was just an immediate hammer for Baker. He was constantly going 2 or 3. That was the Baker from a while ago after the bye. It's not been quite that way. So I'm going to go under, actually. That doesn't mean I don't think the Bucs can't win this game. Their rushing attack's been fantastic. But I think Baker's going to need a little bit to get back into his groove. And to do that against one of the best passing defenses in the National Football League will not be an easy task. So I'm going to go under.
Okay, there you go. And real quick, either you guys willing to give me a score prediction this early in the week? Caleb, you want it? No. Are the Bucs going to win, Caleb?
I think the silence tells you enough, Colin.
I mean, I'll do it. Yeah. See, now you always make me do this on Wednesday, and then we have the actual score predictions. I have to stick with that because I said it on camera on Wednesday. So, give me 24. No, you know what? Give me 28-24 Chargers. I'm gonna go. I think it's gonna be an upturn for the Chargers. I think the Bucs gonna keep it close and score some more points than perhaps many have on this Chargers defense because they have a good offense, but. I think the Bucs do not get it done in Los Angeles. I don't think they need to win the division. I think this is the one game they can drop, but I don't think they come away with it.
Caleb, are you bypassing this week?
No, now I have to go. Now that
exactly, do it.
I'm going to go a little bit lower scoring. I'll go 24-21 Chargers. I think that's just the Chargers aren't necessarily a team that are going to put up a ton of points, but with the Bucs defense and how it is, they are going to be able to. And I think the Chargers defense is just a bit better than where the Bucs offense is, especially with a limited amount of weapons. But it could go either way. I think it's really a toss-up game. Ultimately, being on the road doesn't help, but the Bucs are a resilient bunch and they could come away with it. But I'll give the Chargers the nod here at home, 24-21.
And like the coward I am, and apparently both of you are, I'm going to stick with Vegas's line. I got the Chargers winning by 3. I'll say 27-24. Would love to be wrong on that, that's for sure, because it would be absolutely massive for the Buccaneers and their playoff chances, but wouldn't be as exciting, right? So they could just as easily lose their handle of this NFC South with Atlanta having a very manageable game this weekend. So we will have to see, and we will be hopping on, maybe with River. Who knows? I don't want to make promises. He'll be down at SoFi in LA, but we'll be really
I can figure it out.
Yeah. We'll be really great to touch base with him for our instant reaction episode, which we'll do after the game, shortly following the game. So until then, thank you to everyone who joined us live watching on YouTube. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. And whether you're listening later through an audio platform, whatever it is, we greatly appreciate your support. And please make sure you're checking out BucsGameday.com, Sports Illustrated's only website dedicated specifically to covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Till next week, go Bucs.